Good evening. This is Laura Susan Johnson, and you're listening to Period Pieces. I'm going to try to do this review for a third time. It's been raining here, and my brother and his friends have been shooting fireworks off 3 days early. And we've got lots of frogs, lots of June bugs, lots of insects, as usual, out here. But it's such a cool evening. Very pleasant out here. A little bit muggy, but at least there's a cool, misty breeze. So, my next film review will be 1939's Wuthering Heights. This is directed by William Wyler. This is the only version of Wuthering Heights I have seen thus far. There are numerous versions of this literature classic on film, but this is the first one, the earliest one, I must say, that I found on the IMDb. A lot of people are probably familiar with this title, as well as the Bronte sisters. There's Charlotte Bronte and Emily Bronte, and I'm not sure. I think there may be a third Bronte sister, but I'm not sure. I just know that there is a Charlotte Bronte and an Emily Bronte, and I think Charlotte Bronte is the more well-known. Wuthering Heights, however, was written by Emily Bronte, and I think that Emily Bronte was writing right about the same time as Jane Austen, so this would make this a early 19th century period piece, pre-Civil War. The hairstyles in the movie, the dressing, the costumery, the style of the households, the different things like the modes of transportation, the things that they would talk about, the concerns that they had, the mores, the culture, all seem to be screaming early 19th century. The film stars Merle Oberon as Kathy Earnshaw Linton and Laurence Olivier as Heathcliff and David Niven as Edgar Linton. Anyway, if you like the book, which I admit I've never read, you may very well like this movie. I like this movie quite a lot. And I admit I am neither a lover of 19th century fiction, nor am I a lover of black and white movies. I don't mean to sound like an a-hole. Because the world is actually in color, I prefer color movies, even old color movies. And I'm not a hater of old movies. I like Meet Me in St. Louis. I like Wizard of Oz. I like a lot of movies from the 1940s. And I even like a lot of black and white movies that have Cary Grant, Kathy Hepburn. You name it, there's a lot of movies I'll watch. I don't care. As a rule, I don't really like the fact that a lot of movies are black and white, but I really don't like the old method of colorization. Those old methods that they used to use back in like the 80s or the 90s, those were really tacky, but there are other methods to colorize. But then again, I almost would rather say just leave it black and white, and if it's a good movie, I'll watch it. The reason I'm not really fond of older literature is the writing styles. Now, back in their day, they were very well praised, and probably rightfully so. People liked to read things that were stylized that way. Because, excuse me. because people did not have televisions. I almost feel like I swallowed a bug or something. People did not have televisions, and they did not have radios. So to have your mind engaged in certain long-winded descriptions that writers would use would be fine. You would have your mind engaged. Today, people are more visual because we've just learned to be that way. I tried to read the books from Ellen Montgomery, the Anne of Green Gables series, and I didn't really enjoy reading them. But I really loved the movies / miniseries that they made out of them, so I ended up loving those very much. So, and I've never really attempted a Jane Austen book in my life, so I can't be sure, but I just have a feeling that the writing style would just put me to sleep. I have a bad problem with reading as it is. I have ADHD. And I have certain spinal issues that if I lay a certain way, whether I'm attempting to read or not, I will go to sleep immediately. And I'm sorry about sniffling a lot. I do that a lot while I'm talking because I have severe allergies and the pollen count around here is through the roof. Anyway, so black and white movies, not so much a problem as long as they're a great movie. Books, they have to be very engaging, almost from page 1 for me to be able to read them, especially with the physical problems I have and with my particular problem with ADHD. And that's why I have so many problems reading certain books on Goodreads, because if they're not like grab me from page 1 to where I just sit up and want to read it, you know, instead of just laying there and maybe hoping it'll engage me, I will have trouble reading it. So let's get on with Wuthering Heights. It is a romantic, old-fashioned ghost story, but without scares. It's more a romance than anything else. It's a star-crossed lovers story, but instead of it being kind of like Romeo and Juliet where both of them die, or like Titanic or the Terminator where one of them dies, it's more like one of them fucks up and they both end up heartbroken, and then one of them dies. It's more of an angry kind of a thing. Anger is the central emotion. It's not really revenge, it's more anger. It all starts when a well-to-do man named Mr. Earnshaw he goes on a trip to, I think it's Liverpool. It may well be London, but in the movie I could swear he said Liverpool. He comes home to the moors, to a countryside homestead or chateau or whatever. I don't know what you want to call it, just a house, I imagine. It's called Wuthering Heights, and back in those days, your homestead or your house would have a name like that. Green Gables was a name. Wuthering Heights is a name. He brings back this starving child that he just plucked off the street. Back then, I guess you didn't need to take a child to the police and say, I found this child. what do I do? This child came up to me and begged me for a crumb. What do I do? Take him and give him into the foster care system. This child needs help. In those days, in the early 19th century, if some child came up to you, if you cared enough, you simply grabbed him up off the street, put him on top of your horse, and brought him home. So he brings this child home, and he's dirty, his clothes are torn, he's skinny, he's starved, and at first he's angry, like, why'd you bring me here? I want to go back to where I came from. And the man says, no, you need to stay with us. And he fights, and he's angry, and he's kicking and screaming, and finally the mother takes him into the kitchen and gives him some bread and jam or something like that, and he's pathetically grateful. He gives them all a big hug. The two children, Kathy and Hindley, are both, they're aghast. Well, why did you bring that dirty child to our home? And the father's like, shame on you, children. He's a hungry child. We must be Christians and help him. Something to that effect. I don't know if he said Christians, but, we must be kind to people who need help. That's the way to be decent, So anyway, time goes by, a little bit of time goes by, and before too long, Kathy, the daughter, and this young boy who they have no one knows his real name, apparently. He doesn't divulge his real name. Maybe he doesn't know his name, I don't know. But they decide, we'll just call him Heathcliff. Well, maybe the boy knows his name. Maybe he doesn't even seem to act like he gives a crap. The man just simply says, we'll just call him Heathcliff, and the boy just looks at him and just walks away with the mom, like, give me more food, I don't care. If you call me anything you want, as long as I can stay here. If you guys have food, I'll stay here. So, by and by, Heathcliff and Kathy become good friends. And as children, they ride their horses along the countryside. They, pretend to have secret castles in the moors, and they talk about all the adventures they're going to have when they're older and all that. And then, as they come of age, they start falling in love. But while Heathcliff is kind of on the level and says, he doesn't really say it, but I think he's aware of it, and he believes that she should be more than aware of it. She's more starting to go into her, like, I need a man who will take care of me and give me all my, material luxuries, and I need somebody who's going to offer me a secure world and home and money and all that stuff. And that oddly called to mind that wedding singer plot where Drew Barrymore thinks that she has to marry Mr. Douchebag because he's got a good job in Wall Street and he's making the big bucks, even though he's an asswipe. And Adam Sandler's only a wedding singer with not much to offer her material-wise. So anyway, she catches the eye of Edgar Linton, who is played by David Niven, who is the one thing I know David Niven from most prominently is the classic Pink Panther movie from 1964, Peter Sellers. So anyway, Edgar starts, courting Kathy, and Heathcliff is like, Kathy, do you know what's going on here? Do you really want this? Is this what you want in life? Because I love you. And Kathy won't admit her feelings. She doesn't know what she pretends she doesn't know what she wants, or she's very confused. It's really hard to know. Either that or she knows and she just doesn't want to admit it to herself. She's just so afraid that she's not going to have the kind of life she wants. She doesn't know what she wants in life or something. It's just, you're at that age where you just don't know what you want. Unfortunately, you only get a few chances in life to really make that decision, and you only have a limited amount of time. Well, she's just given so much time and so many chances to make that very, very, important decision. Finally, she and Heathcliff have a heated argument, and Heathcliff leaves in a very angry state, and she chases him out into this terrible storm. During production on the movie, actress Meryl Oberon became quite sick after being subjected to gale force wind machines and cold water being splashed on her for take after take after take, and she ran a fever for probably a week, and they shut down, the film production so she could recover. And then in the story, the character becomes sick. Heathcliff disappears for years, and Kathy eventually recovers from this illness she contracted after she went out into the blizzard chasing Heathcliff. She decides Heathcliff's gone and won't be coming back, so she goes ahead and marries Mr. Linton. She has a daughter. I'm not sure if she had any other kids. I can't remember. I've seen the movie a couple of times, but it's been a couple of weeks since I watched it. And I don't remember if she has more than just the one daughter, Isabella. I think it's Isabella. And years later, she's a comfortable wife and mother with a daughter who's grown up. She has a nice home, nice, quiet, mundane, comfortable life, but very mundane. She's not really happy. She doesn't really love her husband. He's very kind to her, but she doesn't really love him. She appreciates him, but she's not truly happy. Suddenly, Heathcliff is back in town, and he's a rich man. He's gone out and made himself into something. And he's back in town, and this is where it seems to be a revenge score. Like a completely, this is all about, I'm going to get back at you. Well, some could argue, yeah, this is all about, I came back just to spite you. And for a while, it seems to be. He offers Isabella, this Heathcliff, who's probably way too old for Isabella, begins to court Isabella and offers her a good life. And Isabella, says, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Sure, I'll take it. Well, she's only mirroring what her mother did, right? And maybe Heathcliff does have ulterior motives, but it's just what Kathy did, basically. It's really no different. So it's hard to judge Heathcliff being a vengeful prick when all he's doing is looking for somebody to live with and be with. If he couldn't have Kathy, maybe he can have her daughter. Maybe it's his way of being close to Kathy. I don't know. I'm not trying to excuse him. Maybe it is an elaborate revenge plot. He could probably not love her the way he loves Kathy. But he's whether he's on the level or not, I don't know, but he does still love Kathy, and he's angry at her. She's angry at Isabella and says, "You're absolutely not going to marry him," and Isabella pretty much calls Kathy out on her bullshit. You're mad because you wanted him, you blew it, you didn't know what you wanted, you couldn't decide. I'm ready to say yes to him. You didn't know what you wanted. At my age, you didn't know what you wanted. I know what I want. And I'm going to say yes. And so she can't get through to her daughter, so she runs to Heathcliff and says, "I don't want you to marry my daughter. Talk her out of it." And he says, "No, I won't talk her out of it." And she's like, you just want to take my daughter away from me to get back at me. And he says something like, "Why don't you admit you love me, and you know, maybe I'll leave your daughter alone," or something, you know. And it's just really, it's just this, like, game of, Kathy, just admit it. Just admit it. You fucked up. You fucked up. You wanted to be a material girl, and you lost sight of what was important, what was truly important. You know, you had a friend, you had a real friend in your life, and you completely blew it. And you chased him away. So, anyway, all this emotional turmoil suddenly takes its toll on Kathy again, and she gets sick again. And that kind of, I'm not sure if that's sort of a cliche in those days where women were just so fragile, everything made them sick physically. I don't know. That's one little moment where I kind of scratched my head and said, why'd she get sick all of a sudden? What made her so sick all of a sudden? And then poor Heathcliff, he's a little bit like regretful and thinks, oh God, maybe I was a little bit too much for her. I just wasn't sure what caused the illness. You know, I kind of maybe I missed something. I don't know. It might take another viewing for me to get it. But she is suddenly so sick she's getting ready to die. Heathcliff comes over. He decides not to marry the daughter, not the little daughter, the fully grown daughter that's old enough to make up her own mind, but he decides, okay, I won't marry your daughter. And he comes and visits her, and he takes her to the window, when they look out the window, and they talk for a while, and then she dies. And years later, which was actually in the prologue to the movie too, the movie does have a prologue where this visitor comes through a blizzard and asks for overnight shelter because the blizzard is just so awful outside, and he's lost and doesn't know exactly where he needs to go. He's lost his direction in a storm. And he sees this figure of a woman outside in the blizzard, and he's like, who was that out there? That maybe we need to give her shelter. And they just say, no, it's just Kathy. It turns out it's Kathy's ghost. And after everything is said and done, at the end of the movie, it turns out that Kathy passed away from this unexplained illness. And Heathcliff is so brokenhearted by the whole thing that whenever Kathy's ghost comes around and knocks on the window, Heathcliff just goes out into the snow to walk around with her and visit with her. And it's like some kind of insanity thing where it's like a tragic, insane ghost/love story. And it seems a little, you know, it can feel a little bit cliched to modern contemporary audiences today, but in the time it was written, this was probably seen as very daring, new, interesting stuff. And for the star-crossed lover genre, so to speak, and the ghost story genre, it's pretty, enjoyable for me. For myself personally, as a first-time experience with the particular story, I would give it a good solid 8 or 9 out of 10. It's really not new to me, but if I were living in that time period and I didn't have a TV or a radio and I had a book to read and picked up this book, it might be a great new story to me. So it's not bad. I'll give it a watch. Maybe I'll try to read the book someday. I just can't guarantee that I won't fall asleep in the middle of it, because that's the way I am with books, especially books that are written in the last century or two. Anyway, we'll see you next time.